Hello everyone, this is Eric. I'm doing a intro video for vinyl collectors. Um, this isn't vinyl, this is CDs. I have a lot of CDs because for a long time I did not buy vinyl. I didn't have a decent record player. I was buying CDs because they were easy to transport and all that good stuff. I do have quite a vinyl collection, it's just not in here. I'm going to show a couple pieces of vinyl. So, a little about myself. From southeastern Michigan in the Detroit metro area. Grew up in the 80s. Went to college in the 90s, was part of the grunge scene as a listener. Late 90s, early 2000s, I was part of my local punk rock scene, but also the kind of high energy international rock scene. I had some contact with some of the bands like the Helicopters and the Flaming Sideburns and those kinds of groups. And my musical tastes are kind of all over the place. I'm not a big rap fan, I'm not a big jazz fan, and I'm not a huge classical fan. But I've got a little bit of that stuff in my collection. The thing that I really was into and still am into is cowpunk, horror punk, any kind of punk rock that was mixing genres, so psychobilly, blues punk, just really rock and roll is what it comes down to for me. I like a lot of different stuff, everything from Nico Case to Queensryche to, I don't know, Jellyfish. If you know Jellyfish, they're a great pop band. So what I'm going to do by way of intro is I'm going to show some of my favorite records. And I've only got a couple of them on LP, so we'll be showing both LPs and CDs. And we're going to start off right at the top here with the greatest outlaw country album of all time, in my opinion, Waylon Jennings' Honky Tonk Heroes. As you can see, I got it for like $3 at Amoeba Records in Hollywood. So you can find copies of this fairly cheap. Here's the CD. Just great album. Songwriter Billy Joe Shaver wrote all but one of the songs on this album. And if you have somebody in your life or you're somebody who's like, I don't like country music, check this album out. There's hard rockin' songs. There's great ballads. Just solid record all the way around. When I say outlaw country, it was a movement in the 70s where artists wanted to have more control over their albums. They wanted to pick the songs. They wanted to pick the bands they played with. They wanted the musicians that they were on the road with to play in the studio. And Waylon and Willie kind of led that movement in the 1970s. And this is one of the finest records. So, moving on. Punk rock. I like the Pistols. I like the Clash. But for my money, the best UK punk rock band ever was The Damned. I mean, come on, Lemmy was in the band at one point. This is their album, Machine Gun Etiquette, and this is probably their best album. They had some good stuff before and good stuff after, but if you are a newbie to The Damned, this is the record to check out. Just classic stuff. Mixing not only the UK punk sounds, but, covering the MC5. They covered the Stooges, so they kind of knew their history. Great record. Well worth picking up. Speaking of the Stooges and the Five, Radio Birdman, Radios Appear. For those of you that know, that is a reference to the Blue Oyster Cult in the album title. Hailing from Australia by way of Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is actually where I'm from, this band is a Dick Dale meets Iggy meets the Stooges meets 1970s Australian pub rock. Great stuff. Well worth checking out if you like any of that proto-punk stuff. It says 2 CDs because this includes a second CD that has their EP from earlier on it. Great, straight ahead, high energy, rock and roll, uncompromising. The lead singer, by the way, Dennis Tech. In addition to being a rock star, he is also a Navy flight surgeon pilot, and he's also an emergency room doctor, which basically makes him Buckaroo Banzai. He's an amazing guy, just well worth following his career and seeing what he does. Okay, so Legal Weapon, Death of Innocence. I've got the LP right here. One of my all-time favorite LA punk bands that didn't get enough love. I don't really know why. They may be a little too commercial, maybe not. Later on they got commercial. But female-fronted bluesy punk. And I should note that the stuff they're covering in their songs has a lot to do with abuse and heartbreak. And all of those kinds of things that the Riot Girls would cover in the 90s, only, in my opinion, Legal Weapon did it better. This album is just 30 minutes of pure punk rock fury. So good. So well worth rediscovering and checking out. At some point, I will do a video all about this band. Okay, we're going to go back to the UK punk scene for what I consider to be the best of the second wave / oi bands, Cockspar. Their roots were back in the 70s during the pub rock era. This album, right there, Shock Troops, this to me is the natural follow-up to The Clash. Socio-political, sing-along, straight ahead, just great, great stuff. They get some flack because Oi was co-opted later on by the National Front, but there is nothing in here that indicates any kind of bent towards fascism or racism. They are a band that actually, there's an essential LP box set that I have. That's one of my big vinyl splurges in my life, and maybe at some point I will do a video on just that. But most definitely, Cockspar or Shock Troops, an album that's worth checking out. Okay, we're going to go to the Tall Boys next. It's offshoot of the Meteors. This album's called Wednesday Addams, a Boyfriend. The Meteors were the original psychobilly band in the UK. They were mixing punk rock and rockabilly. The rhythm section, basically the bass player and the drummer, split off and formed a couple of bands, including the Tall Boys, which is probably their best known. What set them aside from the other rockabilly, psychobilly bands is there was a good dose of garage rock in there. Now, there is a CD, and I don't know where my copy is, it's around here somewhere, that is a collection of all of their recordings that if you want to hear them, it's well worth tracking down. They were on the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, and that's how I discovered them. Their song on that soundtrack was maybe not as great as the rest of the songs on that soundtrack, but stuff on this record probably would have fit better, and actually stuff that they recorded that is not on this record would have fit better on the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack. All right. Speaking of the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, Jet Black Berries. Now this is something very special. This is the cassette tape safety recordings from the initial recording session. And the reason that I have this is because I'm friends with the band, but also because the LP and CD, or compact disc, not compact, cassette tape, this never made it to CD. Cassette tape that came out at the time, there was a problem between the recording and the mastering plant, and it came out sounding muddy and not great, and the band was imploding at the time, so they just didn't really care. They had also kind of been scooped by REM, because they have a song on here called Animal Necessity, which is the name of the album. That's very much like End of the World as We Know It, and they were concerned that they were going to get tagged as having copied REM, and they were all copying Dylan, to be fair. This is a great record with great songs, poor production. This is the decently produced version, and there's also some, because this is the band's safety cassette tape recordings from the sessions, this has some great alternate takes with some different singers and like a country edition and stuff. Jet Black Berries is another band that I absolutely love. They put out several albums, have had various incarnations, and at some point I will definitely be doing one of these just about that band and all the stuff you should check out from them. But if you see them in the discount bin for $1 or $2, pick it up, give it a shot, especially if you like 80s college rock, alt country, Graham Parsons, any of that kind of stuff. William S. Burroughs, you're going to find something on here that you dig. All right. Okay. The Forbidden Dimension. Somebody down there likes me. If I was ever going to get the chance to put one LP out on vinyl, this would be it. This is quite simply one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Blue Oyster Cult inspired horror rock, horror punk, with some rockabilly, some surf, all of that good stuff. Punk rock in it. You know, the cover art's amazing. The lyrics are great. The allusions to obscure 70s and 60s sci-fi and film and all that kind of stuff it's on point. The songs are infectious. They're well written. This band is from Calgary, Alberta, and no idea why they never got as huge as other bands at the time. I can't recommend them highly enough. If you see them in a discount bin somewhere, or you see their records, just check them out. All right. Put that back up that way. Screaming Trees Dust. Simply the final grunge album that matters. The best of the final set of albums put out by the original grunge bands. This is a requiem for the scene. This is a band reflecting back on what they had seen over the last 5 years, the friends they had lost, watching everything fall apart. It's also a hopeful album in that it kind of points to the future. There's definitely a gospel element to it, slightly, and well worth checking out. And that album cover's killer. Next up, international high energy rock and roll scene from the late 1990s, early 2000s. This is the Ultra Bimbos. They were kind of related to the Flaming Sideburns, who were, if you know about that scene in the Nordic lands, it was Turbo Negro from Norway, the Helicopters from Sweden, Flaming Sideburns from Helsinki, Finland, and then the Ultra Bimbos. This is just great rock and roll, all female. One of my favorite albums. Can't recommend it highly enough. Check it out. Finally, there's a lot of other stuff behind me. There's The Damned, there's Driving to Crying, there's Cheap Trick, there's just Queensryche, King's X, all kinds of stuff that I love. But I want to make something very clear from the outset. There are no Beatles in my collection, and this is the only Rolling Stones album that I own. You will not hear me talking about those bands. Everybody talks about the Beatles. Everybody talks about the Stones. If that's your thing, great. It's not my thing. I have a minor interest in the Stones. The Beatles I don't really care for. So if you're looking for that, you'll find it elsewhere. But for me, you're going to find stuff hopefully you've never heard of, stuff that flew under the radar, stuff that might sound interesting to you. It's worth checking out. That's it. So thank you all for watching. Please like the video if you like it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and hopefully talk to you all later.